Hello once again, everyone. In this video I've got some good news and some bad news, and I'm hoping for some good news at the end, but I don't know what will happen yet. Start with the good news first. The garage lighting project has progressed a little bit from where it was. Initially, when last I worked on this was the last light that was in use and hooked up, but I installed two more of them today. And while the placing is a little inconvenient, that's just how it worked out, and there's no worry about it clearing the garage door or anything like that. I have another light that I'm going to install down there, which is actually sitting here on the sawhorse, but I ran out of all the supplies I need to do that. And then I believe I'm going to start another row of lighting over this particular bay. When I got done with all that, I turned my attention to something that was sitting in my storage shed that I had forgotten about, but on Saturday night I decided I was going to go out and get it and record a demonstration video, an exploration of this, a Packard Bell Excel 110SX personal computer. This was something that was retired from the local library when they got two new computers for the patrons to use, and then one of the older computers that had been for the patrons to use was relocated to the librarian's desk. The other publicly accessible computer, which had a card catalog on it, was actually something that I sold off a couple of years ago. This machine sat in storage for a couple of years, and I hauled it out again today to try it out and make sure that it was in shape fit to run. Part of the reason I dug this beast out of storage has to do with this. You see, the other day I made a video talking about the 386DX 40 megahertz personal computer, and I pointed out how these batteries are nothing but trouble, and if you see one, even if it doesn't seem to be leaking right now, this one has not leaked to my knowledge, and I don't see any signs of fallout here on the board. But I thought, you know, I'll get this thing out of storage and I'll check up on it and at least make sure that the battery hasn't leaked, and whether the battery's leaked or not, I'm going to go ahead and remove it from the system. So I hooked the system up and gave it a quick once over to make sure that nothing might have taken up residence in it or anything like that. Powered it on, and the monitor came up with a message saying out of range synchronization. So I figured, well, you know, something's got to be wrong somewhere. So I took it all apart, checked it out to make sure that I hadn't overlooked anything, plugged it back in, and the first thing I hear is a terrible shrill from the switch mode power supply. Apparently something was shorting its output pretty badly because the switching frequency had dropped well into the audible range. So that's not good at all. I think the power supply might well be a write-off for reasons that I'll get into here momentarily. And here's a look at the power supply, everyone, and as you can see there's some evidence of rust having taken place here. I'm not really sure why that happened, because where this machine was stored it wasn't climate controlled, but it was dry. The place had a new roof on it, and nothing else out there shows any kind of damage signs like this, including stuff that was actually stacked on shelves lower than the one this computer was on. Still, I think I'm going to take it as a warning and maybe consider moving some of the more valuable things out of there. But here's a look at the power supply's circuit board, and the one thing that you can see, something has definitely happened here that's not good. I don't know if that's electrolyte leakage from the capacitors or what that might be. There's glue holding these capacitors in place that has turned thoroughly brown, as you can see. And that brown glue can sometimes turn conductive and cause all kinds of problems. There's evidence, this looks like rust at first, but I think it's just the resistors there have been running hot over the years, because this is only a 60 watt power supply, and I would say it probably wouldn't like to manage that for any permanent length of time. And there's more capacitor damage over here by these two transformers. If I zoom in, you can see that that capacitor right there almost looks as though it burned, which doesn't seem logical to me, because the outer wrapping there is not damaged in any way. It's just the top. Something happened to the top of it. And there's a couple capacitors nestled in back there as well that look like they have seen better days as well. First time I turned this supply on, I had no idea there was anything wrong with it. It started up, and as I say, it ran normally. But the system did not power on, other than by virtue of the front panel LEDs, which did light. The second time around, as I said, this thing hit its current limiter and shut down, at which point I killed power almost instantly because it sounded like just the most ghastly wailing sound that you have ever heard. It wasn't good. You know, whatever was going on in here, I knew instantly that it was bad, bad news. So I'm hopeful that the motherboard wasn't hurt and that the power supply's protection circuitry intervened before it was too late. Now, unfortunately, I don't have another power supply like this, or at least I don't think I do. I have a newer 120 or so watt version of this in the same form factor from a 486 era Packard Bell system in the same, I think this was called the 3x3 case. This machine was actually retired from the library not because anything was wrong with the power supply or the motherboard. It was retired because the hard drive broke down. And I didn't have anything in my collection at the time. They were thinking of retiring this machine anyway, so it ended up getting phased out. So for a little bit of a demonstration tonight, I'm going to cross my fingers, borrow the outputs from the power supply on the 386 DX40 machine, and see if this motherboard could possibly have survived the power supply failure that took place earlier today. I'm really hoping that it did. Now this is a risky thing to do because depending on how well this power supply is circuit protected, if there's a fault on the motherboard, which I don't think there is, or something was damaged on the motherboard and damaged in such a way that it's now going to short the power supply, this could damage the second power supply as well. But I do have a couple of these in storage somewhere. I'm just not sure if I have a replacement for this one or not. Alright, I've got the surrogate power supply hooked up. Let's throw the switch and hope there's not too much smoke. Actually, I probably better turn the monitor on first. And I'll throw the switch here and see if anything happens. That's a good sign. We got an LED for power at least. See if we get any video. Well, that doesn't look so promising. So I fear this system may have ended up dying a death through its power supply. How unfortunate that is. Actually, I'm going to backpedal a little bit on what I just said. It may not be over for this system just yet, because just as I was finishing up that last video segment, I left the power on this thing on, and all of a sudden I heard two rather sickly, closely spaced beeps from the motherboard's speaker. I also noticed that when I turn the power on, it does send an initialization command to the keyboard that causes all of its activity LEDs to flicker as well. So some things are definitely happening here. It's just not getting far enough to actually put anything up on the screen, not even after simplifying the configuration by removing some of this memory. Now this board is a lot filthier than I ever remember it being, so I'm thinking I may pop it out of here now that I've removed the troublesome battery and all that stuff, and just go ahead and throw it in the dishwasher for grins and giggles, and see if maybe there's some slightly conductive crud on this board that might be holding it down and keeping it from starting completely up. But it's definitely trying to do something, and I'll have to see if I can get it to do anything more. You know, maybe the onboard video has gone bad, maybe one of these two EPROMs is corrupt over here. It's hard to tell, but it's trying to tell me something, and if anybody out there thinks they might know what it is, two closely spaced beeps, I would certainly appreciate hearing from you.